1 Timothy 5, 1-2, do not rebuke an older man harshly, but exhort him as if he were your father. Treat younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, and younger women as sisters, with absolute purity. This Bible verse encourages respectful and familial treatment towards elders and peers alike, encouraging harmony and respect within the community. In a small and quiet town covered with green environment throughout the year, lived an elderly man named Mr. Johnson. He was known for the stories he would share with anyone who cared to listen. Every afternoon, he would sit on a weathered bench in the park, his faithful companion, Blossom, the female dog, resting beside him. One sunny afternoon, a group of children from the local school passed by the park on their way home. Among them was Lizzie, a spirited girl with a curious mind. She often heard her parents talk about respecting elders, but she wasn't quite sure what it meant. Intrigued by Mr. Johnson's presence, Lizzie approached him timidly and greeted him with a shy smile. "Hello, sir. My name is Lizzie. I've always seen you sitting on this bench every day as we've come from school. May I sit with you for a while?"
Well, hello there, Lizzie. Of course, my dear. It would be my pleasure. How was school today?
As they sat together, Mr. Johnson began to tell Lizzie stories of his youth, of adventures in distant lands, and lessons learned over decades. Lizzie listened intently, occasionally asking questions that sparked deeper conversations. Meanwhile, the other children watched from a distance, their curiosity piqued by the unlikely friendship unfolding before them. In all the days they had passed through the park, they had never seen Mr. Johnson so animated, so alive with stories and laughter. It was good. Just a lot of homework. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Enjoying the lovely weather. You know, sitting here reminds me of my younger days. Would you like to hear about some of my adventures?
That would be amazing. I'd love that.
Okay, come and make yourself comfortable.
Meanwhile, the other children watched from a distance, their curiosity piqued by the unlikely friendship unfolding before them. Since they started noticing the old man, they had never seen him so animated, so alive with stories and laughter.
All right then. When I was about your age, I was quite the adventurer. I remember one summer, I decided to explore the forests near my hometown. I had always been curious about these forests, and it was now a time of discovery and wonder.
What did you find in the forests? I can't wait to hear what it was.
Oh, I found all sorts of things. Rare birds, hidden streams, and even an old, abandoned treehouse. Each day was a new adventure. But the most important thing I found was my love for nature.
Did you ever get lost?
Many times. But getting lost was part of the adventure. It taught me how to find my way and to always be prepared. When I grew older, I traveled to many countries. I went to Africa and saw the vast savannas, to Asia where I climbed mountains and explored ancient temples, and to South America where I trekked through rainforests.
I wish I could go on adventures like that.
You can, Lizzie. Adventure is all around us, even in our everyday lives. It's about being curious, open-minded, and willing to explore. Start with small adventures, like exploring your neighborhood or learning something new. And who knows? One day, you might find yourself in distant lands, just like I did.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for your engaging and interesting conversation. I have to get going, lest my friends leave me and my parents start getting worried on my whereabouts. I'll be seeing you. Take care.
You're welcome, my dear child. Remember, every great journey begins with a single step. And sometimes, those steps lead to the most wonderful stories.
Lizzie arrived home, her face glowing with excitement as she recounted her day to her mother. "Mom, guess what? I approached and greeted Mr. Johnson, you know, the old man who always sits in the park by himself. We had the most wonderful conversation, and I learned so much about him. He seems very respectable but also quite lonely." "I'm so glad you did that, Lizzie. It's important to show respect to our elders, but remember, he is still a stranger. Be careful, okay? As the Bible says in Leviticus 19:32, stand up in the presence of the aged, show respect for the elderly and revere your God. I am the Lord." "I will, Mom." Remember Job 12:12 says, "Is not wisdom found among the aged?" Does not long life bring understanding? Days turned into weeks, and Lily became a regular visitor to the park bench. She brought Mr. Johnson small gifts, a drawing she made during art class, a freshly picked flower from her garden, that made his eyes twinkle with delight. "I made a drawing for you. I thought you'll love it. You can hang it in your sitting room."
Thank you, my for being so thoughtful. I love it already. May God bless you. You do bring sunshine into my heart.
Thank you. May God bless you too for your words of wisdom. One rainy afternoon, as Lizzie approached the park, she noticed Mr. Thompson wasn't there. Concerned, she asked the park keeper if he had seen him. "Good afternoon, sir. Have you seen Mr. Johnson, the old man who usually sits on the park bench?"
He's not been feeling well, dear. He's probably resting at home.
Without a second thought, Lizzie ran to Mr. Johnson's house. She knocked gently on the door and was greeted by his daughter, who welcomed her inside. Mr. Johnson was lying in bed, looking frail but relieved to see Lizzie. She sat by his bedside, holding his hand, and shared stories she had heard from her own grandparents. Mr. Johnson listened, his eyes brimming with gratitude. They spared a special bond that couldn't be explained, Lizzie's from missing her late grandparents and Mr. Johnson of loneliness. "I'm so happy to see you well, Mr. Johnson. My grandparents used to tell me about the old days, how they would dance under the stars during summer nights and the way they would gather around the radio to listen to the news. It always sounded so magical to me." Mr. Johnson smiled weakly, his eyes twinkling with the memories Lizzie's words brought up.
Those were good times, simpler times.
"Do you have any stories like that? Something you remember fondly?"
There was a time when I took my late wife to a fair. It was the most beautiful evening, the air filled with laughter and the scent of caramel popcorn. We rode the Ferris wheel, and at the top, I told her I loved her for the first time.
He closed his eyes for a moment, as if searching through the archives of his mind. Lizzie's eyes glistened with tears and she said softly, "I wish I could have seen it." Mr. Thompson opened his eyes and looked at her with a gentle smile.
You bring that same joy into my life, Lizzie. Never forget that.
They sat in silence for a while, holding hands, each lost in their thoughts but comforted by the presence of the other. In the following weeks, as Mr. Thompson regained his strength, Lily continued visiting him regularly. She would read to him, bring him homemade treats, and simply sit quietly by his side. One sunny afternoon, as they sat together on the park bench, Mr. Johnson turned to Lizzie with a soft smile. He said, his voice barely above a whisper,
"Thank you, my dear. You've taught me that respect is not just about words but about actions, about the kindness and love we show to one another."
"Thank you too. I've learned so much from you. Starting from respecting our elders and knowing that there is so much we can learn from them just as I have learned from you." Lizzie beamed with pride, knowing she had made a difference in Mr. Johnson's life. And as she looked around, she saw the other children from her school sitting on nearby benches, chatting with elderly park visitors or helping them cross the street. From the day on, the park became a place where generations connected, where respect and kindness flowed freely. And all because a curious girl named Lizzie learned the true meaning of respecting her elders and shared that wisdom with others. Respecting elders begins with parents. In the fifth commandment, Yahweh commanded his people, "Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you." Exodus 20:12. This is emphasized throughout the Old Testament. Proverbs 23:22 echoes the fifth commandment, "Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old." Harsh consequences were set for children who did not respect their parents. Children are intended to be a blessing to their parents. Psalm 127:3-5 and are to listen to their godly counsel. Proverbs 1:8-19, 19:26-27. Much of the book of Proverbs is structured around the idea of a wise father passing on godly wisdom to his son.